Did she really just call me a leech at my own daughter's birthday party? I remember the exact moment the room went quiet. Balloons floating above the cake. Kids laughing in the backyard. And my mother-in-law's voice slicing through the air like a knife. "She's been living off our son for years," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some women just know how to attach themselves and never let go." A few people chuckled. Others looked away. And my husband? He said nothing. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. This wasn't the first time they had said it. It was just the first time they said it in front of me. Before we get into what happened next, and trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends, take a second to subscribe to the channel. These stories are real, raw, and sometimes unbelievable, but they all prove one thing. When someone pushes you too far, the truth has a way of coming out. Now let me tell you what really happened that day. My name is Emily Carter, and when this story happened, I was 34 years old. If you had asked anyone at that birthday party who I was, most of them would probably describe me the same way. Daniel's wife. Or worse. The stay-at-home mom. But what none of them knew, what none of them ever bothered to ask, was how much I had actually sacrificed for that family. The party was for my daughter Lily's 7th birthday. I had spent the entire week planning it. Baking cupcakes from scratch. Decorating the backyard with pink streamers and unicorn balloons. Setting up a little treasure hunt for the kids. It was the kind of party Lily had been dreaming about for months. And honestly, seeing her little face light up when she saw the decorations made every sleepless night worth it. "Mommy, it's perfect," she squealed, throwing her arms around my waist. Moments like that made everything feel okay. Even the quiet tension that always came whenever my in-laws were around. You see, Daniel's parents had never liked me. Not from the very beginning. When Daniel and I met 10 years ago, I was working as a pediatric nurse. I loved my job. I loved helping kids. And I was proud of how hard I'd worked to get there. But when Lily was born, everything changed. She had severe asthma as a baby. The kind that sends you to the ER in the middle of the night. After her 3rd hospital visit, Daniel and I made a decision. I would stay home for a few years. Just until Lily was stronger. At least, that was the plan. But life has a funny way of rewriting plans. Between Lily's health issues, Daniel's long work hours, and the cost of childcare, those few years quietly stretched into 7. And somewhere along the way, my in-laws started telling a very different version of that story. In their version, I wasn't a mother making sacrifices. I was a woman who had quit working so she could live off their son. The worst part? Daniel never corrected them. At first, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. They just don't understand, I'd say to myself. They're old-fashioned. But the comments kept coming. Little ones at first. Passive-aggressive smiles. "Oh, Emily, it must be nice not having to work." Or, "I remember when women used to contribute to a household." I always laughed it off. For Daniel's sake. For Lily's sake. Because the truth was, I didn't want conflict. But that afternoon, standing in our backyard while the kids played and the adults gathered around the food table, something felt different. I was inside the kitchen carrying out another tray of snacks when I heard voices drifting through the open patio door. Daniel's mother. And his sister Karen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But then I heard my name. "I'm just saying," Karen muttered. 7 years is a long time to stay unemployed. His mother scoffed. "Oh please. We all know what's really going on." I froze. My hands tightened around the tray. "What do you mean?" Karen asked. Then came the sentence that made my stomach drop. "She saw a successful man and locked him down," my mother-in-law said coldly. "Women like her always do." Karen laughed. And then came the word that would echo in my head for the rest of the day. A leech. They both laughed. Right there. At my daughter's birthday party. And suddenly, all those little comments over the years started connecting together like puzzle pieces. The looks. The whispers. The way Daniel always changed the subject when his parents brought up money. That's when a horrible thought crossed my mind. What if Daniel had never defended me, because he secretly agreed with them? I stood there in the kitchen doorway, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a moment, I considered walking back outside, pretending I hadn't heard anything. But then Lily ran past the door in her princess dress, laughing with her friends. And something inside me shifted. Because if they thought I was going to spend the rest of my life being quietly humiliated in my own home, they had clearly underestimated me. What they didn't know was this. I had been silent for years. But that silence was about to end. I wish I could say I walked straight outside and confronted them right then. But the truth is, I didn't. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen, completely frozen. My hands were still gripping the tray, so tightly my fingers were starting to ache. I kept replaying that word in my head. Leech. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of raising their granddaughter. 7 years of cooking family dinners, hosting holidays, helping Daniel through 2 job changes, and staying awake through Lily's asthma attacks. And that was what they thought of me. I slowly set the tray down on the counter before I dropped it. For a second, my eyes burned with tears. I hated that feeling. Hated the idea of crying because of them. But the truth is, betrayal like that hits differently when it comes from family. Especially when it confirms a fear you've secretly carried for years. I took a deep breath and wiped my face before stepping outside again. The party was still going. Kids were running across the yard with plastic treasure chests from the scavenger hunt. Someone had started music near the patio table. And there they were. Daniel's mother and Karen, standing by the drinks table like nothing had happened. Laughing. I tried to act normal. I really did. But when I walked past them, Karen gave me this tight little smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Emily, she said sweetly, the decorations look cute. Cute. Like I was a teenager throwing a backyard party, not the woman who had organized every detail of the day. His mother didn't even look at me. She just took a slow sip of her wine. That's when I noticed something else. Daniel was standing only a few feet away, talking to his father. Close enough that he had to have heard at least part of the earlier conversation. My heart started pounding again. I walked up beside him quietly. Hey, I said softly. He glanced at me. Hey. I waited. Just a second. Maybe 2. Maybe he'd say something like, "Are you okay?" Or, "Ignore them. They're being ridiculous." But he didn't. He just took another sip of his beer and kept watching the kids. And that silence, that hurt more than the insult. Because in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't surprised by what they had said, which meant he'd heard it before. Maybe many times. And never stopped it. The rest of the party felt like I was moving through fog. I smiled for Lily, sang happy birthday, helped her blow out the candles. But inside, something was cracking open. By the time the last guests started leaving and the sun dipped low behind the trees, my chest felt so tight I could barely breathe. Lily ran inside with her new toys, exhausted and happy, and the adults gathered near the patio one last time. That's when it happened. Karen was telling some story about one of her coworkers when Daniel's mother suddenly looked straight at me. Then she laughed. Not a friendly laugh. A sharp one. "You know," she said loudly, swirling the wine in her glass, "some women really do have life figured out." The conversation stopped. Everyone turned toward her. She nodded toward me. "Stay home. Let the husband do all the work. Must be nice." My stomach dropped. Karen smirked. "Oh, come on, Mom," she added. "Don't be mean." But her voice carried zero sincerity. Then she said it. Right in front of everyone. I mean, I'd probably do the same thing if I found a guy willing to support me forever. A couple of people laughed awkwardly. Someone looked down at their phone. And Daniel? Still silent. I felt the heat rush into my face. My throat tightened so badly I thought I might actually cry right there in front of them. And for a moment, I almost did. 7 years of biting my tongue. 7 years of being the nice daughter-in-law. 7 years of pretending their little comments didn't hurt. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel's father leaned back in his chair and muttered under his breath, "Well, she is living off him." The words hit me like a slap. And suddenly everything became crystal clear. This wasn't just a couple of rude jokes. This was how they truly saw me. Not as Lily's mother. Not as Daniel's partner. But as some kind of parasite attached to their son. My chest rose and fell slowly as I looked around the table. At the faces of people who had eaten the food I cooked. celebrated birthdays in my home, held my daughter in their arms, and thought so little of me. For a second, the old version of me whispered the same thing it always had. Just let it go. Keep the peace. But then I thought about Lily, about the kind of example I was setting for her, about what she would learn if she saw her mother sit there and accept humiliation. And something inside me finally snapped into place. Not anger. Something colder. Stronger. I straightened my shoulders and slowly stood up from my chair. The table went quiet. Daniel looked at me confused. "Emily," he said. But this time, I wasn't going to swallow it. Because what none of them knew, what none of them had ever bothered to ask, was that the story they had been telling about me for 7 years was completely wrong. And I was finally ready to tell them the truth. But the part that really changed everything was the number I was about to say next. The table went silent as I stood there. 7 pairs of eyes locked on me. Waiting. Curious. Some amused. Some irritated. Daniel looked uncomfortable, like he wanted the moment to disappear. But it wasn't going to disappear. Not this time. I folded my hands calmly in front of me, even though my heart was beating hard in my chest. "You're right," I said quietly. Karen blinked. "What?" I nodded slowly. "You're right. Letting Daniel support me must look pretty convenient." Karen smirked like she had just won something. Daniel's mother leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the moment. But I wasn't finished. "I just have one question," I continued. Everyone was watching now. "Did Daniel ever tell you why I stopped working?" His mother shrugged. "You had a baby. Plenty of women have babies and still manage to work." I nodded again. "That's true." Then I turned and looked directly at Daniel. His expression had changed. Something nervous flickered across his face. "Daniel," I said softly, "did you ever explain to them what happened 7 years ago?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "No," I answered for him. "You didn't." Karen crossed her arms. "Explain what?" I took a slow breath. 7 years of silence ended in that moment. "The night Lily had her 3rd asthma attack," I said. "You remember that night, Daniel?" His jaw tightened. I continued before he could answer. "You had just lost your job. Your startup collapsed. And we were 3 months behind on the mortgage." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Karen's smirk faded. I kept going. The hospital bill for Lily's treatment was almost $40,000. Daniel's mother frowned. "What does that have to do with?" "It has everything to do with it." My voice stayed calm. Steady. Because while Daniel was trying to figure out how we were going to survive financially, I made a decision. I paused. Then I said the sentence none of them expected. "I sold my company." Karen frowned. "What company?" I almost laughed. That was the thing about people who assume things about you. They never actually ask questions. "Before Lily was born," I said, "I co-founded a pediatric telehealth startup with 2 colleagues from the hospital." Daniel's father sat up slightly. "We ran it for 4 years. And right after Lily got sick, a medical network offered to buy it." I looked around the table. I sold my share. Karen stared at me. "For how much?" she asked slowly. And that's when I said the number. $2.8 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's mouth literally fell open. Daniel's mother blinked like she hadn't heard correctly. "What?" she whispered. I continued calmly. "I used almost half of it to pay off the hospital bills, the mortgage, and Daniel's business debt." Now Daniel couldn't even look at me. "And the rest?" his father asked carefully. I smiled slightly. "The rest is invested." Karen shook her head like the idea didn't make sense. "If that's true, why are you living like a normal person?" I finished. Because money wasn't the point. I looked toward the house where Lily's laughter drifted through the window. My daughter needed a healthy mom who could be there when she couldn't breathe in the middle of the night. Then I looked back at the table. "So yes," I said softly. "Daniel supported the household income for a few years. But our family survived because of me." No one said a word. Not Karen. Not Daniel's father. Not even my mother-in-law. Her face had gone pale. All those years of calling me lazy, a leech, a freeloader. And the truth had been sitting quietly in front of them the entire time. Then I reached into my pocket and placed something on the table. A folded document. Daniel looked down at it confused. What's that? He asked. Something I finalized last week. He opened it. His eyes widened instantly. It was a post-nuptial financial agreement. Very simple. Very clear. It protected every dollar of my remaining investments and assets. Karen leaned over and read part of it. Wait, you made him sign this? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. She asked me to last week. I nodded. After I overheard your little conversation in the kitchen today. I'm very glad I did. No one had a comeback. Because there wasn't one. For 7 years they thought I was living off their son. But the truth? I had been the quiet safety net holding the entire family together. I picked up my glass of lemonade and took a calm sip. Then I smiled politely. So no, I said gently. I'm not a leech. I stood up and walked toward the house where Lily was playing with her new toys. Behind me, the patio stayed completely silent. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling. It isn't fighting. It's simply telling the truth and watching the people who underestimated you realize how wrong they were. And trust me, that realization lasts a lot longer. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful real-life betrayal and revenge stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because some stories prove one thing very clearly. The quietest person in the room often has the strongest truth waiting to be told.